A vast horizon of smoke rises from burning cities, twisted timber and stone collapsing under the weight of unseen forces. The sun, barely visible through thick ash-laden clouds, casts a dim, flickering light on empty streets where once bustling markets thrived. Ships, their sails shredded and masts broken, drift aimlessly in foggy harbors, abandoned by crews who vanished without a trace. Across distant plains, armies march through dust-choked valleys, their armor battered, their banners torn. Citizens flee behind crumbling city walls, clutching what little they can carry. Faces etched with fear and confusion, temples, carved with sacred reliefs, lie shattered, altars overturned, incense burning to ash in the wind. This was not the work of a single empire. It was a wave, sweeping across the eastern Mediterranean, Anatolia, and the Levant, leaving devastation in its wake. Kings and scribes chronicled their kingdoms, yet none could foresee the unraveling that would come. Palaces once adorned with gold and ivory now stand silent, corridors echoing with ghosts of vanished courtiers. The year was 1200 BC. The world of the Late Bronze Age, interconnected, prosperous, and seemingly invincible, teetered on the edge of annihilation. Merchant caravans laden with copper and tin no longer returned. The networks that bound civilizations together dissolved into chaos. Trade routes once filled with exotic goods lay empty, overgrown, and silent. In the heart of Mycenae, soldiers wandered through halls of shattered frescoes, their footsteps stirring dust on mosaics of forgotten gods. Across the Nile, scribes pause over crumbling papyri records, interrupted mid-sentence, their ink fading as if the very words feared the coming darkness. On the coast of Ugarit, the sea carries wreckage from the docks into waves, fragments of pottery tumbling endlessly beneath storm-lashed skies. The collapse is a mystery that has fascinated historians for millennia. No single invader, no single famine, no single earthquake can fully explain it. Instead, a convergence of catastrophes struck in unison, toppling mighty civilizations with an almost cinematic inevitability. The world watched as its towers fell, its temples desecrated, its people scattered, and yet, in the ruins, whispers of knowledge survived, fragments of letters, scorched scrolls, remnants of jewelry, and burned weapons. They tell a story not of a single defeat, but of a civilization-wide unraveling that reshaped the course of history forever. The Late Bronze Age was an era of unparalleled connection. Lands from the Aegean to the Levant were woven together through trade, diplomacy, and culture. Palaces rose like mountains of stone in Mycenae, adorned with frescoes, depicting chariot races, lion hunts, and divine ceremonies. In Egypt, pharaohs ruled from the immense mortuary temples of Thebes, overseeing a kingdom of fertile river valleys and desert frontiers. Cities such as Hattusa in Anatolia thrived, their massive gates and fortifications, standing testament to political power and military might. Markets hummed with activity. Bronze flowed from Cyprus, tin from distant western lands. Silks, spices, and ceramics traveled hundreds of miles, carried by merchant caravans and seafaring vessels. Traders negotiated beneath sun-drenched skies, counting ingots of metal, weighing grains, and exchanging scrolls of diplomacy. Diplomacy was a visual theater. Royal emissaries arrived in chariots, bearing gifts of gold, lapis lazuli, and finely woven textiles. Letters, written on clay tablets or papyri, crisscrossed kingdoms, maintaining alliances, settling disputes, and recording treaties. Every empire was bound to the other in a delicate balance. Egypt relied on grain from Canaan and timber from Lebanon. The Hittites controlled Anatolian resources, forging treaties with neighbors. The Mycenaean Greeks, masters of the Aegean, extracted tribute and traded goods. Even distant Babylon and Assyria felt the ripple of commerce, their economies intertwined with maritime trade routes. In this world, war was a constant backdrop, yet it was measured. Rich wise armies drilled in sun-scorched training grounds, archers firing volleys into the horizon, chariots slicing through dust clouds. Soldiers wore bronze cuirasses that gleamed, shields painted with symbols of gods and kings. Cities were fortified with walls tall enough to shadow markets, gates adorned with carvings of protective deities. Yet, even in the height of prosperity, fragility was built into the system. Civilization relied on a tightly interwoven network of supply lines, grain stores, and metal distribution. A drought in one region could ripple through kingdoms. A disrupted trade route could starve armies and destabilize courts. Diplomacy was as much about preventing collapse as it was about asserting dominance. Every scroll, every alliance, every shipment of tin and copper was a thread in a tapestry that, if torn, could unravel everything. By the 13th century BC, the stage was set. Empires gleamed with wealth. Soldiers trained in echoing barracks, and scribes chronicled histories that they could not yet imagine would end abruptly. Ports bustled with activity, ships creaking under cargo, waves slapping hulls, gulls wheeling in stormy skies. Palaces smelled of incense and burned oil lamps. Markets resonated with haggling and the clink of coins, and temples thrummed with chants, echoing across marble floors. Civilization thrived, but beneath the surface, stress and tension were growing. Then, it began. Cities burned with relentless fury. Hattusa's gates splintered under siege, fires consuming grain stores and libraries alike. The streets ran thick with smoke and dust, the cries of civilians mingling with the clash of bronze weapons. Chariots overturned in alleyways, wheels broken by rubble. Soldiers, exhausted and desperate, abandoned fortifications, leaving the once proud city exposed to unknown forces. Along the coasts, Ugarit, a city of trade and diplomacy, fell in flames. Merchants fled to the shore, hurling goods into the sea, hoping to escape by boat. Ships capsized in storm-driven waves, their cargoes of silver and tin scattered beneath grey waters. Temples were looted, altars overturned, and sacred inscriptions defaced. Evidence from cuneiform tablets reveals frantic letters, pleas for aid, warnings of marauders. Scribes recording names of the dead, never to return to families. Across Greece, Mycenaean palaces were destroyed. Walls that once echoed with royal proclamations crumbled. Frescoes depicting feasts and rituals lay in dust, shards of pottery littering the streets. Soldiers moved through smoke-choked streets, shields battered, swords dulled, faces smeared with ash. Villagers watched helplessly as their world disintegrated. Archaeological evidence shows entire settlements abandoned, hearths cold, and tombs left untouched. Invading forces, known only through fragmentary records and conjecture, swept across territories. Some call them the Sea Peoples, enigmatic warriors whose origins remain a mystery. Others were internal rebellions, displaced populations, or opportunistic raiders. Cities were sacked, fortifications breached, economies collapsed. Palatial administrations, once efficient and interconnected, vanished almost overnight. Grain stores were empty. Trade routes, long arteries of wealth and communication, were cut. Even Egypt, long thought invincible, faltered. Pharaohs recorded battles along the Nile Delta. Forts destroyed, ships burned. The luxurious life of the court continued only briefly, as letters revealed supply shortages and social unrest. Creeping into towns and villages, the Bronze Age world, linked by trade, diplomacy, and military power, was unraveling. At multiple points simultaneously, leaving behind ruins that would take centuries to rebuild. This destruction was not uniform. Some regions survived relatively intact, isolated from the chaos, while others were entirely depopulated. Archaeological surveys reveal burned layers in cities, collapsed fortifications, abandoned harbors, and graves left unmarked. The scale of destruction suggests a phenomenon that was systemic, hitting multiple civilizations simultaneously. The records, when pieced together, tell a story of sudden decline, widespread violence, and an almost total societal breakdown. Historians and archaeologists have long debated the causes of this unprecedented collapse. One theory points to climate change. Evidence from pollen analysis, sediment cores, and isotopic studies suggests prolonged droughts swept across the eastern Mediterranean. Rivers ran low, grain yields fell. Famines spread from Anatolia to Egypt, weakening populations and undermining economies dependent on surplus crops. Systemic fragility amplified these stresses. Societies reliant on complex trade networks and centralized administration could not adapt quickly to shocks. The disruption of a single critical supply tin for bronze, grain for armies could cascade into famine, rebellion, and warfare. In cities like Ugarit, clay tablets record shortages, petitions to kings, and desperate attempts to redistribute resources. The economic infrastructure that had once been a source of strength became a vector of collapse. Invasions and internal unrest compounded the problem. The enigmatic Sea Peoples, or perhaps multiple groups of displaced populations, moved along coasts and rivers, targeting weakened settlements. Archaeological evidence shows burned layers in major cities, mass graves, and weapons left in haste. Political structures crumbled under pressure. Kings disappeared from records, dynasties ended abruptly, and bureaucracies failed to function. Some scholars suggest earthquakes or natural disasters as additional factors. Evidence of collapsed buildings, fissures in fortifications, and sudden abandonment of settlements, supports this theory. Others point to systemic social unrest, heavily taxed populations, labor shortages, and rebellion against elites destabilize the delicate equilibrium of Bronze Age states. The truth likely lies in convergence. Drought, famine, invasion, rebellion, and economic stress combine to create a perfect storm. No single cause explains the widespread devastation. Instead, the late Bronze Age world fell because it was tightly coupled, highly interconnected, and unable to absorb simultaneous shocks. Civilization, it seems, was fragile precisely at the moment of its greatest complexity. The Bronze Age collapse is a lesson etched in stone, clay, and ash. Entire civilizations, with their kings, scribes, merchants, and soldiers, vanished in decades. Palaces crumbled, trade networks dissolved, and cities burned. Yet, in the ruins, fragments of memory survive: letters, pottery, jewelry, and inscriptions. These whisper the story of a world that once was. This moment reminds us that prosperity can be precarious. Societies, no matter how advanced, are vulnerable to forces both natural and human-made. Complex networks, while powerful, can unravel when stressed beyond capacity. Environmental shifts, economic fragility, and social unrest can converge to destabilize even the mightiest of civilizations. Today, we study these vanished worlds, not merely to catalog destruction, but to understand resilience and fragility. We see echoes of the past in modern cities, supply chains, and globalized economies. The story of 1200 BC urges reflection. Choices societies make, how they adapt to change, determine survival or collapse. History, in this sense, is a mirror. Civilization is both enduring and fragile, capable of magnificent achievement and sudden unraveling. As we explore these ancient worlds, let us carry forward their lessons, to observe, to adapt, and to learn from those who came before. Continue to seek the stories hidden in ruins. Trace fragments of letters, listen to echoes of abandoned streets, and witness the rise and fall of civilizations. In doing so, we connect with the profound narrative of humanity itself, a story that is never truly finished.